Hi, Jasmine. Welcome to Miracles Happen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure thing. This is such a unique topic. I can't wait to get into it. Obviously, all related to fertility stuff, but I can't wait for people to hear your style and how you work through stuff and coach people, right? So,
Yeah.
can you, speaking of what you do, can you give us like a mini bio, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Jasmine Katatikarn. I live in New York City. By day, I work in computer animation on feature animated films. So if you've seen movies like the Ice Age movies, Ferdinand, Rio, if you wait until the very end, you can see my name among the hundreds of artists that have worked on that movie.
Oh, cool.
So that's what I do by day. And other than that, I am very active in the fertility community. It's kind of my passion. You'll hear after going through my own journey, I just kept coming back to the fertility community to give back and to also share what I learned. Yeah,
Oh,
so that's a little bit
good.
about me.
Yeah, I find that a lot of people are drawn back to be able to help other people going through the same thing. So, can you tell us about your journey? I'd love to hear your story. You have a wild one.
Yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster, as many fertility journeys are. So, where do I begin? I guess where I always think about is I was following this path, this perfect path that I was taught honestly at a very young age. It's kind of like that social norm. You work, you study hard, you go to good school, you have a good career, you get married, you have 2.5 kids, and then you work really hard and retire at 65. And I, I admit I was totally following that path kind of blindly. And I was going through checking off all the points. And it was when I came up to starting to try to have a family, is when I really hit my biggest roadblock on that. And at first it's all about the life you envision, right? And when I when I first hit this block, well, I'll just say in my perfect plan, and I feel so I feel so naive, like thinking back on how naive I was, but I had planned, I'd get married by 28. I was married by 28. I'd have fun for 2 years, and by 30, I would
Yeah.
start trying. And by 35, I'd have 3 kids, no problem. That was it. I was just like, yeah, that's my plan, and then I would, work hard and retire. So right on schedule at 30, I started trying. And I still remember joking with my husband that first month. And I'm like, oh, I'm surprised I'm not pregnant after the first month of trying.
Yep.
And the joke was not so much a joke as much anymore when a couple more months went by. And then
Right.
eventually a year passed, and we still were not able to get pregnant. And that's when, before then, obviously, I was starting to get concerned, but that's when I actively went to a doctor. And my OBGYN said, well, I think you should go to a specialist. So we went to a specialist, and we did all the preliminary exams that you do, right, on both sides, and they didn't find anything. They
Oh,
said, I know, and it's so
so
frustrating.
frustrating. Yeah.
And they're like, well, nothing's standing out to be a problem, but, there's something that must be going on because you're not getting pregnant after a year. So we're going to give you the diagnosis of unexplained infertility,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very frustrating diagnosis because
Yeah.
you just want to solve the problem, right? But if
Of
you're kind
course.
of given this thing like everything seems okay, but something's wrong. So,
Yes.
and it's like shooting in all directions when you're trying to search for solutions.
Yep.
And that's exactly what I ended up doing for the next couple of years. I mean, we started doing IUIs almost immediately after being diagnosed with unexplained. And we probably did about 3 to 4 IUIs at this one clinic over a series of 2 years, probably. And during that time, also, I was constantly in Google, trying everything, seeing
Yep.
what will work. And I fell down that little rabbit hole,
Mhm.
and nothing worked. And a couple of years went by, and finally the doctor's like, well, we're no closer to figuring out what the issue is, but there's obviously something going on. Maybe we should try IVF. And at that point, I was like, okay, let's do it. It had been a year or two. And in my mind too, I was like, oh, once we do IVF, that's it. It's going to be,
That's right.
I'm good to go. You know, everyone gets pregnant with IVF. And before, and I will say during this whole time, I didn't tell anyone we were having issues trying. I kept it all inside. I barely even told my husband, really. I mean, not told my husband. That sounds. I didn't really talk to my husband about it.
Right.
We're both like very quiet people. So
Mhm.
it was during this time where I first told my father that we had been trying, only because he's a doctor. So I
Mhm.
wanted to get his medical input on it. And he said to me when I told him I was thinking about doing IVF, that if I want to do IVF, he suggests going to a different clinic.
Okay.
And this was the first time that I started getting an idea that not all clinics are the same,
All
or
right.
you have to put other things into fact as a factor when you're doing fertility treatments. And the labs are a big factor, especially when you're doing things like IVF. And I was like, okay. So I took his advice, and then I picked what I thought was like one of the, in New York City, there's so many
Sure.
clinics, but I was like, okay, this one's, you know, has a good name. It's reputable. So I went there. So I went to a different clinic, and I still remember meeting with that doctor, and he said to me, he went over my labs. He's like, at that point I was 33, 30, I forget. It all becomes a blur.
Sure. I know.
Oh, and I remember he was very confident. He was like, "Oh, I don't see a problem. You're still young. You're healthy. There's nothing that shows that there's any complications." And he said, "Let's do a couple rounds of IUI again, just to make sure that isn't a possibility, and also honestly, partially because of insurance reasons, which is like another thing you deal with fertility, if your insurance even covers it, I should say."
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we did even more IUIs. I believe we did 3 cycles at the new clinic. So at this point, I
Wow.
probably have like 7 IUIs under my belt,
Mm-hmm.
and none of them took. So during this whole time, I never even got close to pregnant in my mind, and it was very frustrating. But I kept going. You know, it's like it's this whole emotional like trying and keeping up the hope. And there it was finally time for the IVF, and the doctor's like, okay, let's try IVF. The IUIs are not working, and I was so excited. I remember I was like, oh, finally, I'm gonna do IVF. This journey is 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 gonna be over. And we started the IVF cycle. The meds and everything and the appointments were pretty, nothing really stood out to me. The big difference that we learned was I wasn't a big responder for my eggs. Like, I still hear stories of women retrieving like 20 some eggs or 30 some eggs,
Sure.
and I my highest was probably 10.
Mm-hmm.
It was always lower than 10. So, but I kept telling myself it only takes one, so it doesn't. That's not a concern of mine. So we went through the first IVF cycle, and it was um, it was fine up until we did the retrieval. I retrieved, like I said, 10. That was the most I've ever retrieved. And we did ICSI, and about probably 7 or 8 fertilized. Around day 2, there were 5 that were good, and we were scheduled for a day 5 transfer. And that morning of the day 5 transfer, I was so excited. It was after all these years, it was the closest I felt like I was to possibly becoming pregnant. And I was out the door, and my phone rang, and it was a nurse from the clinic, and she said, "Your appointment's been canceled, so you don't have to come in."
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah. And I was like, I didn't even know. I remember being really confused. I was like, what do you mean it's canceled? I have my transfer today. Like, this is the day. And then she said, well, none of them made it to day 5.
Oh my God.
So there's nothing to transfer. And I didn't even, it was my first IVF. I didn't even know that was a possibility
Possible.
that could
Yeah.
happen. Like, I had gone through everything, all the meds, all the appointments, the surgical, retrieval. And it was the last step. It was the transfer. And I felt cheated, honestly. I had done
Heck
all the
yeah.
work. And it was tough. And that night I remember being really upset about it, but the next day we were meeting with a doctor, so I built myself back up again, and we went into the doctor's office that morning, and she said to us, well, I have a new diagnosis for you. I think it's poor egg quality.
Mm.
And at first I remember thinking like, oh great, finally we have the issue
Mm-hmm.
that I can like pinpoint and focus on. So my next question was, well, okay, how do I improve my egg quality? And her answer was, well, you can't. You can't improve egg quality, which is not the answer you want to hear.
No.
And I pressed her a little bit more on it, and then she finally said, well, some people think acupuncture could help with egg quality. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm on it. Like,
Yeah.
she could have said anything to me at that moment, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, go.
Traveling to a foreign country and praying to a fertility god. Yes, that'll do it.
Exactly. And I would have been like, okay, booking my ticket right now. And I've seen those. That's a sidetrack. But, and so I did. I booked, I made an appointment with a fertility acupuncturist in the city. And I, like, for the very next day, I was on, I needed to start right away. And she was great. It was actually, I joked with her that she ended up being 80% therapist for me and 20% acupuncture, because it was the first time in my journey, and this is had to be 5 years, almost 5 years into my journey at this point, and I still was not releasing my emotions. I wasn't talking to anyone. I wasn't looking for support. I just was really hiding it, and I was ashamed. I thought, I didn't want to tell anyone that I was having these issues. So it was the first time I finally was able to release some of my emotions, and I remember that being so freeing. And I couldn't believe it took me so long in my journey to do it as well. And she she advised that I do a 3-month detox to prepare me for my next IVF cycle and increase my egg quality. So we did that, and I did acupuncture for 3 months. I did a total like diet, fertility diet, and exercise. I always exercise, so that wasn't a big change for me. But what also changed during those 3 months, I feel like it was the first time that I was able to slow down and be okay with it. Because I feel like when we're trying to get pregnant, it's so much on our mind that there was so much anxiety, and every time I felt like I had to go. Like, after one failed cycle, I'm like, okay, what's the next one? Like, I never even gave myself time to relax and figure out what I really wanted to do. So those 3 months were great for that too. So those 3 months were up, and I was ready for my second IVF, and it was almost too much like the first one. I mean, it was almost identical to the first one.
Okay.
In the beginning processes, where the meds were pretty much the same amount of eggs, a little bit less. I believe I retrieved like 8 at the time, and obviously I was really nervous for that day 5 transfer. It was the same exact thing. I got my appointment for the day 5 transfer. The only difference was that morning I was at the acupuncturist office doing an appointment before to get my body ready for the transfer. And I still remember when the acupuncturist came back into the room, she had this look on her face, and she And I just knew instantly. And she said, they called, there's no transfer today.
Oh God.
So really, actually, the same exact thing did happen. I said it was almost too identical. It was pretty much identical. And I was devastated. I mean, this is the second time it happened. 2 rounds of IVF with all the work that goes with it. Plus, I took 3 months to really work on my health and my body, which I don't regret because I still have lasting effects from that. But that's what's so hard about fertility. I find is that you can work so hard and there's never a guarantee that it's going to work. And I would always relate it to the frustration of it. It's like, let's say I wanted to lose weight. There's a very specific way to be like, if I do these steps, I'm almost guaranteed to lose weight. But with fertility, there's nothing, right? You hear something works for someone or some, it's just like you're gambling and you're working. And I think for me growing up, I always translated hard work equals getting to your goal.
That's right.
As long as you work hard, you're going to get there. And for fertility, it's not true. And that's where I really struggled with that as well. And so that morning, when I saw this was probably one of the lowest points in my journey. We were walking back. Me and my husband were walking back from the acupuncturist office across the park, and I was crying. And not only was I devastated that I didn't get my transfer, but I had so much guilt that was inside of me because I was the barrier of my husband becoming a father. Because at this point, it was egg quality, and there was just it was on me, right? Everything with him was fine. And I didn't mention this before, but when I met my husband, although we met really young, we met in college, but he's the type of person, when you meet someone and they're just meant to do something or be, in some profession or something. He's the type of guy that's like meant to be a dad.
Yeah.
And he's a lot more paternal than I am. And he's just like, he needs to be a dad. For me, I knew I'd be okay if it didn't work out, but I was like, I can't live with the fact that I would be the one stopping him to be a father. Mm-hmm. And on that walk home, I said to him, I was like, if this doesn't work out, I need you to go. I need you to go and find someone so you can be a dad, because you need to be a dad. And I still get emotional thinking about it, because it's real. Like, I would still, those emotions are so strong. And on top of fertility, so hard because it's not only, it's physical, but it hits you in all directions, right? It's physical, it's mental, it's emotional. And of course, he said almost instantly, like, no, we're going to figure this out together. But I mean, to this day, I still meant it, and I still mean it. And so that evening, we talked it through some more. And the next morning, I had the doctor's appointment again. And I pumped myself back up for this doctor's appointment. I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to figure this out. And I remember being excited to hear, or ready to hear, what the next step was. I was ready to do the work. And when we sat down that next morning at the doctor's office, she almost instantly started talking about egg donors and adoption. And I was taken aback. I was like, wait, are we? I interrupted her. I was like, can I not try another cycle with my own eggs? And she said, no, I wouldn't recommend that. And I said, are you sure? Like, can I try? At this point, I'm 35. And then she finally said, she's like, I give you a less than 1% chance of having a child with your own eggs. And
wow,
it was that probability was hard. I mean, I feel like with fertility, we hear all different, you know, with stats,
Mm-hmm.
stats all the time. It's like, that's 20% chance, that's whatever. And, you know, those feel not a little bit low, but then like less than 1% chance, it was absolutely devastating.
The punch in the gut.
Yeah. And it was like a nice way of saying 0%. I mean, and I still remember, like, so at this point I'm 35. In my perfect plan, at 35 I was supposed to have 3 kids by now.
Right.
And here I am at 35 sitting across from this doctor after trying like nonstop for 5 years, being told I had less than a 1% chance of having a child. And I have not felt like I was close at all to ever being pregnant within those 5 years. It was exhausting. And it would have been so easy to just stop at that point.
Sure.
And I did think about it too. I mean, how could you not? Or think about, you know, doing the egg donor adoption like the doctor suggested. And we walked out of that meeting and we were both so quiet. I mean, I think that's where it was just like, we had never heard anything that that, I don't want to say negative, but yeah, I mean, that like that loss of hope was just there. And I still remember, it's crazy, we just like hugged each other, we said we'll talk about it later tonight, and then we just both went off to work. Because that's what you do in these, like, no one knows that I've been struggling at all. I had to go back into work, and I with a happy face, I can't just tell someone, I was just told I have less than a 1% chance of having a child. I'm going to take the day off. I mean, I guess I could have taken the day off, but that day, I remember I cried all the way to work on the train. And then by the time I got to work, I like put myself back together. And as I was at work, kind of processing everything, and I started distracting myself with issues that I had to solve at work. And I work in computer animation, so it's very creative, but it's also very technical. And as I was problem solving something, an issue that I ran into, it also occurred to me, and this was like my aha moment, that
is this the radical mindset shift you had?
Yeah. So this is like so it always happens at the lowest point, I feel like, or when you're just kind of left feeling defeated. That's the moment when it's like, wait, I need to do something about this. And I realized, looking at my fertility journey, I kind of went through it blindly, like blind trust. I never did any research. I didn't stop to really figure out what was best for me, and get second opinions or get different solutions on things. I just kind of, whatever someone said, I'd be like, okay, that sounds good, and I kept going. Right. Where at work, I would never do that, right? When faced with a challenge or an obstacle, I would assess what the real problem is, and then I would get multiple kind of perspectives and get multiple solutions for that problem, and then have a plan of action for it. And if that
based on what's important to you.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. And if that first, and if it didn't work out, I didn't stop and just throw my hands up. I would say, okay, well, that didn't work. Let me iterate it. It's all like a testing phase. So you're always moving forward and you're testing and iterating different things. And I realized in my journey, I did none of that. And also I didn't get the second opinions. And also at this clinic where I did 2 IVFs, they were essentially the same procedural twice. There's no testing and iterating. And that's when I was like, okay, I am going to basically experiment on myself, because at this point I had nothing to lose. I was just told less than 1% chance. And
that nothing to lose phase, that nothing to lose, that place is very motivating.
Yeah, because it's like the pressure is kind of off too, right? And so I one of the processes I do at work is getting multiple opinions and different perspectives, and that includes, for fertility, it was Eastern and Western medicine for me. So the next day I actually met with my acupuncturist who gave a very unique perspective from her point of view, and she knew my case, and we discussed it and we brainstormed, and she said, I think maybe that clinic wasn't for you, and there's another place that I think you should try. And she even had a specific doctor that she thought I'd work really well with. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's get another opinion into this. And I met with him that week. And I still remember the appointment. He was looking over my labs and he's like, yeah, I think it is probably egg quality, but he didn't agree with the less than 1% chance. And even just that, like hearing that second opinion, I was like, okay. And I could have just easily have not have done that, right? Any of that. I could have just said, this doctor told me that I have to stop trying, and I'm just going to stop. And I think that's another thing in fertility or anything with the medical field. And I have full respect for doctors and anyone. Sure. My father's a doctor, but then you also have to remember that they're just human beings.
That's right.
And so that's why it's so important to get multiple opinions on it. And this is where, and this doctor also, we talked about it, and then he said, let's try a day 3 transfer. Let's do another IVF cycle, but let's try a day 3 transfer. And I was like, that sounds great. And that's perfectly along the lines of like testing and iterating. Like, okay, my 5-day transfer isn't working for me, so let's do a day 3 transfer. And I didn't even know that was a possibility until, talking with another doctor about it. So that's exactly what we did. I did another IVF cycle, my 3rd IVF cycle at my 3rd clinic. At this point, almost 6 years into my journey, and everything went pretty much the same as the first 2 with the retrieval. It's always like 1 or 2 less eggs in each retrieval, which is a little concerning. But it was time for day 3 for the transfer, and I actually got the transfer, which was amazing. Like that in itself was, I thought, I was like, oh, this was a success, because at least I like got one step closer. And then the result was I did become pregnant. I was pregnant.
Wow.
And that was only a couple of months after that moment. I was sitting in the other doctor's office being told I had less than a 1% chance. Wow. And it was like 3 months after I was getting the call that I was pregnant with my own eggs. And I just couldn't believe the contrast, the difference between the two. And it was just it's just taking that time to get the other opinions, and then also like just iterating on the procedure a little bit, and it worked. So that was the radical mindset shift that
beautiful
I went through. And now I have a 4-year-old daughter from that IVF, and she took 6 years to come to me, but I am forever grateful.
Oh, beautiful. Congratulations. What a story.
Yeah, thank you.
What a story. I love that. So how did this all lead you to, so you talk about the function, like your role at work, and how that translated into this fertility process, and how you use that now for when you help other people, right? So we talked about, or you write about using, approaching fertility through like an artist's eye, an artist's way of being. And I'm wondering if you can expand on that.
Yeah. First, before I go into it, you do not have to be an artist
good.
to use this. I feel like when people hear like using the artist mindset or the approach, they're like, oh, well, I'm not an artist, so I can't do that. It's not the case at all. Anyone can use this approach, and it's really easy and accessible for everyone. And the way I've broken it down into kind of 4 steps that you can really apply to anything, not only fertility. So the first step, and I call it my freedom method, and it's free, FREE is kind of the acronym for that. And the first step before you do anything is to focus on yourself and focus on and to find what your core values are. Because this is something where it might sound ridiculous, but it's like, do you know what your core values are? If I did not, to be honest with you, and
Sure.
what really uniquely makes me happy and fulfilled. And without knowing that, it's kind of like going through life blindly, like trying things and also kind of going along what society thinks is the ideal,
Yeah.
which I was doing as well. And it wasn't until I sat down and really figured out, what do I really want to be happy? What do I need to be happy? So that way I know what I'm striving for. So that's the first step, to really get to know yourself, figure out what are your values, and they're unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second step is, when you have a challenge, is to reframe that obstacle or challenge. Because often when we are faced with an obstacle, it's very closed-minded. We're kind of like in the trees, but we can't see the forest.
Right.
And usually by reframing your challenge and stepping back, taking a pause and stepping back, you're able to get a better, broaden your outlook, and you can see the big picture. So, for example, for me, I was so focused on how do I get pregnant, right? And maybe that wasn't the focus that I should have been putting all my energy on. It's more like, what would getting pregnant do for me? And it's like, oh, well, I'd become a mother. Well, what would being a mother do for you? So you kind of like back up, and then you hit on those core things that you're really striving for. So getting pregnant is just one solution to that challenge that you might be facing.
Oh,
So that's,
excellent point. Yes.
yeah. So it's making sure that you are focusing on the right problem, on the right challenge. And then once you find that out, that's when it's kind of fun, and you start exploring and finding multiple creative paths, multiple creative solutions to your challenge. So for many of us, I feel like in the fertility, and for me too, I used to think there was only one solution, right? That the baby was the only thing. It's an all or nothing thing. And then when I discovered this method, there were multiple ways that I could fulfill the different needs I had that I would get from being a mother. So so as a result, it kind of relieves that stress and pressure on, I have to get pregnant in this cycle. I have to have this baby. And it allows you to still, this is what I love about this process. It allows you to still actively try. You're not giving up on anything, but it allows you to move forward regardless and actively fulfill yourself in different ways, because you can see how you can do that, and it's not dependent on this child. And then once you find all these amazing solutions that you have, then that's when you put it into action, right? You will choose, I often suggest to choose only like one or two of the top ones at first, so you don't overwhelm yourself, and start implementing it and start testing and iterating. And what that does is you constantly are moving forward towards your goal of being happy, being fulfilled. So even, with the fertility, with the ups and downs that we get, it makes a huge difference. I will say, after something doesn't work out, like you have a failed cycle, if you already know what the next step is, or you already have other solutions, other possibilities that you know that it will work eventually, it just relieves so much of the stress and the pressure, and that feeling of feeling lost and
desperate.
exactly. So those are the 4 steps, where the first step is to find yourself, figure out what your values are, what makes you uniquely fulfilled and happy. The second is to reframe your challenge and really stand back and think about what it is you're trying to solve. And then you find multiple creative solutions, creative paths for that. And then finally you put it all into action, because nothing works without action, right?
That's right.
And you're actively always moving forward. So I think that's another thing with fertility, is we often feel like we're pausing, like life is on pause because we're just waiting for this thing to happen.
Yeah.
And it's hard, but by doing this, you're always actively moving forward.
Yes, I feel like that's probably one of the top struggles that people come to me with, is that feeling of stuck, like I'm
Yeah.
not moving forward at all. And your approach helps create that sense of movement.
Yeah,
Also,
exactly.
I love that no wonder you said you don't have to be an artist to do this, because you have, like, you're talking about your job and how, yes, there's this artist, this graphic artist stuff, creative stuff, and yet very technical, and like 1 + 1 = 2, which is very much like your approach, right?
Yeah,
Because it's very like, here are the steps, and there's creativity within that. That's
exactly.
so great.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah, and I kind of call it like a little superpower that you have once you start using this method, because you can apply it to everything. And
Sure.
it completely gets you unstuck
Yeah.
from small situations to big situations. So imagine the ability to never be stuck, never find yourself hitting a wall. It's amazing,
Imagine.
yeah.
Just imagine. Boy, we could end right there.
That's it.
Leave people with this imagination, man. So when you became unstuck, right? And I guess you're using this still every day in your own life, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
What changed for you? What did this unstuckness, like freeing yourself from this stuckness, even outside of the fertility world, what changed for you?
Everything's possible now. Like, I feel like I do kind of feel like it's a little bit of a superpower where, we're going to run into obstacles. It's only natural. But when the obstacles come, and like it's big and small, it's a very everyday life to big things. Of course you feel them, but then you know the next steps, and it's just so freeing, honestly, to know that, life's going to bring things up for you. It's never going to be easy, but when it does, that you have the tools in yourself. You have the power to control how you approach that,
Mm-hmm.
and you can always find solutions. And it's been really empowering,
That's
honestly.
the word that
Yeah,
comes to my mind too.
yeah.
Yeah, that it's always within you. So
Hmm.
that was one of the points that I wanted to highlight too, that you were talking about. Yeah, you go and you get others' opinions and others' thoughts, and maybe not obsessively like Dr. Google, but you get actual like possibilities or others' thoughts, and then you choose what is most meaningful for you. So everybody's way isn't this standard, and I have ultimate respect too for physicians. It's a rough job. Um, but it's not this like standardized statistical measure. This is what we do for everybody. It is this, okay, I heard your opinions, all of these opinions and thoughts and ideas, and I'm deciding what feels right for me. So
Exactly.
congrats to you. I love that you figured it out and you've laid it out for people like that. That's so wonderful. And
Yeah.
so now people can come to you, right,
Hmm.
to process their journeys with you in this way, right?
Yes.
If they
So
feel they need guidance.
yeah, I mean, it's been one of my missions since I had my kids. I do have a second that is also through
Yay.
IVF. Um, and once it's I've always wanted to share this, and ever since I had my second child, who's a son, um, I kept thinking, because I don't see it. I mean, when I look at fertility resources, I see a lot about diet still and exercise,
Yep.
and a lot of questions around meds, all the technical stuff, but nothing that approached it the way I did. And I felt like I had to share it. It was this thing that broke me free from everything. And that's when I created a free fertility training around it to start introducing people around it. I also do provide private coaching for those that want like more personal one-on-one. But yeah, I want to share it with everyone because it's going to change the way not only for your fertility journey, but for your life moving forward. And it's so freeing.
It's so freeing. And what a great method, freedom, right? It's a big connection. It feels so freeing and empowering. And yeah.
And then, so they can find, they can start with the free training video that I have to get started.
Great. And that'll be linked up on the show notes too, so people can easily access that, either from the show notes on the wherever you're listening, or also YouTube if you're watching. It'll all be there. So I'm so excited to help people connect with you, especially if this really resonates with people. I think that it really will. And congrats on spreading it out there. It's necessary. I think you're right. There's so much about what do I do with my body, and there's less about mindset and I do more like spiritual stuff. So it's, and mindset stuff, but we need more of that. We need more of that. So any final words, Jasmine, of wisdom or any inspiration you'd like to offer folks?
It's a big question. I mean,
I know.
I often think about what I would have liked to have been told in the beginning of my journey to save me a lot of time and pain. And the biggest thing would be, one, to apply this method because it is so freeing, but to be your own best advocate. Because for me, it took me way too long to do that. I was kind of just trusting, going to one doctor, not going to any others. And not trusting myself. I thought, I felt like the journey was bigger than me, I guess. I was almost playing the victim, to be honest with you. I was just kind of going along. So to be your own best advocate and also to get support. And that's something that I also did not do. As I said, I didn't share it with anyone. And I actually didn't share it until after I had my child. And once I did, I realized how freeing that was, and also how much trauma that I was keeping inside. And I never thought of that before. Yeah. So get support early. And it doesn't have to be in the form of, you can do it through coaching and community, but even just journaling. Just start small. You don't have to tell everyone about it. Just release it somehow.
Yes.
So that would be my last words on.
Yes. Good. Well, there's your R too. Reframe and release. Ooh.
Yay. Ooh, yeah. I like that.
I love it. Good. Jasmine, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.